Hello, dear YouTube viewers. I hope you're doing well. Okay, so let's start our video. He had been away for nearly 2 weeks, a business trip that kept him moving from airport to airport, hotel to hotel, yet his mind often drifted home. On the plane back, he pictured the look on his wife's face when she would see him earlier than expected. He thought of walking through the front door with flowers in his hand, maybe making dinner reservations, and telling her how much he had missed her. He even rehearsed how he would hug her first before saying a word, the way he used to when they were newly married. In his chest was a warmth, a hopefulness that returning home might also mean returning to something softer between them. He had always been a loyal man, the type who never entertained flirtations on the road, who answered her calls even during meetings, who believed marriage meant honesty above all. He trusted her completely, though somewhere in the back of his mind there had always been a shadow of insecurity, a whisper that maybe she didn't feel the same way. Still, he never gave that whisper power. He chose trust because love without trust felt meaningless. As the taxi pulled into the familiar city streets, he pulled out his phone. He thought about calling her, but he wanted the surprise to stay intact. A notification blinked. It was a message from her. His heart lifted instinctively, but then his eyes settled on the words, "Having lunch with Jason. Just call an Uber." At first he read it twice, thinking he must have misunderstood. But no, the name was clear. Jason. The name that carried with it a history he never liked to touch. Jason was her ex, the one she had once described as just a friend now, the one she insisted had no place in their present lives. He remembered her laughing when he had asked about him. Once, "You worry too much. Jason's nothing to me." But here was the name, casually dropped, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. Shock spread through him like cold water down his spine. Why Jason? Why today? Why the mention of an Uber when she believed her husband was still hundreds of miles away? Did she truly forget he was due home tomorrow? Or was this proof of something deeper, that in her mind, his absence had already been filled by another presence? The message wasn't long, but every word carried an implication, a weight. He sat there for a long moment, the phone trembling slightly in his hand, though his face remained calm. On the surface, he forced composure, but inside, a storm had begun to swirl. 100 questions collided with 100 fears. Betrayal burned at his throat, but so did a strange, stubborn dignity. He knew he could call her right now, ask her what she meant, demand the truth. But instead, he slipped the phone back into his pocket. He would not act rashly. He would not give away the fact that he was already back. Beneath his restraint, the anger pulsed. He remembered the first time Jason's name had surfaced, an old contact on her phone, a quick explanation about a work project. Then, later, a joke at a party, her hand brushing Jason's arm too familiarly. Each time he had told himself he was imagining it, that suspicion was poison and love demanded trust. But now those moments flashed back like puzzle pieces snapping into place. He closed his eyes and inhaled slowly, the way he used to steady himself before a big presentation. The betrayal cut deep, but deeper still was the realization that cracks had been forming for a long time. Her sarcasm at the dinner table, the coldness in bed, the way she sometimes smiled more at her phone than at him, he had noticed, but he had chosen to ignore. Now, those memories pressed down on him, undeniable. And yet, even as heartbreak twisted inside him, he made a choice. He would not explode in fury. He would not send a desperate text or call her out without proof. If she thought he was away, then perhaps that gave him an advantage. Quietly, carefully, he would uncover the truth. Only then would he decide what to do with it. He didn't tell her he was back. The airport taxi dropped him a few blocks from home, and he walked the rest of the way, dragging his suitcase just far enough to stash it discreetly in the trunk of his car. The plan he had rehearsed on the plane, the flowers, the dinner, The joyful reunion was gone. Now he moved with the caution of someone who knew he was trespassing in his own life. He unlocked the front door as quietly as he could and slipped inside. The air smelled faintly of her perfume, not the usual trace left behind in their bedroom, but strong, recent, as if she had just sprayed it in the living room. On the counter, 2 wine glasses sat in the sink, each carrying the half-moon imprint of lipstick. One was hers. The other, he told himself, must have been Jason's. His chest tightened, but he forced himself to breathe steadily. A laugh rang out from the upstairs hallway, muffled by a phone pressed against her cheek. It wasn't the kind of laugh she gave him anymore. It was lighter, free, the sound of a woman being admired. He stood at the foot of the stairs, listening, his hand gripping the banister, until the sound of her footsteps receded into the bedroom. He retreated, his body moving on instinct, careful not to be seen. Later, when she left for errands, he sat at her desk, her laptop glowing in front of him. Social media revealed nothing. Her accounts looked clean, curated, even dull, but when he opened the messaging apps, the truth began to bleed through the cracks. Playful exchanges with Jason filled the screen, jokes they had made about movies, late-night messages sent after midnight, little winking emojis that said more than words ever could. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. You always know how to make me laugh. Lunch wasn't enough. His throat closed as he scrolled, each line cutting deeper than the last. His hands trembled, so violently that he had to grip the edge of the desk just to steady himself. He wanted to slam the laptop shut, to hurl it across the room, to scream until the walls cracked. Instead, he kept reading. Each message was a blade, but he needed to know how deep the wound went. His mind raced. Should he confront her tonight? Demand an explanation? Or should he gather more proof? Strip away every layer of denial she might hide behind? Rage told him to explode now, but something colder inside him whispered, wait, watch, learn the truth before you speak. That whisper carried him back to the beginning, to a time when their marriage wasn't defined by suspicion. He remembered the first day he met her, when trust was effortless and passion needed no prompting. They had dreamed of a life where loyalty wasn't questioned, where love was its own guarantee. She used to tell him she couldn't imagine herself with anyone else. In those early years, her eyes softened when she looked at him. They built plans together, laughed over burnt dinners, shared secrets in the dark. But somewhere along the way, her laughter changed. Criticism replaced compliments. His silence grew longer because words only led to arguments. He thought patience would fix things, that if he gave her enough space, they'd find their way back. But now, standing in their home with Jason's name glowing on her screen, he realized the distance hadn't just grown, it had swallowed them whole. The next morning, he made his decision. If she believed he was still away, then he would use that invisibility to uncover what she had hidden. When she kissed the air goodbye, saying she was going shopping, he slipped into his car and followed. His pulse thudded in his ears as he trailed her through familiar streets. She didn't turn toward the market. Instead, she pulled into a cafe, the kind of quiet corner place where 2 people could pretend the world didn't exist. Jason was already there, waiting. He stood as she entered, his hand brushing hers, his smile lingering too long. They sat close, their bodies leaning into one another in a way that spoke louder than words. From the driver's seat across the street, the husband watched. His heart hammered, but his face remained still, frozen into something harder than grief. Every gesture, every glance between them confirmed what he already feared. She laughed, that same unguarded laugh he had heard from the stairs. Jason touched her hand briefly, and she didn't pull away. In that moment, he felt himself dissolve, as though he were no longer flesh and blood, but a ghost drifting outside the glass. Was I already replaced while still alive? The thought cut deeper than any image before it. He gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white, the weight of betrayal pressing down on him. From the outside, they looked like a couple who belonged together, while he sat alone in the shadows, invisible, erased from the story he once believed was his. That evening she returned home with shopping bags in her hands and a smile, so casual it almost fooled him. Her footsteps echoed lightly on the hardwood floor, and she called his name in surprise when she saw him in the kitchen. He told her he had come back a day early, his tone warm, as though nothing at all was wrong. Her delight seemed genuine, too genuine, almost rehearsed, and she threw her arms around him, kissing his cheek as if their marriage hadn't grown cold months ago. He had already set the table, dinner steaming on the plates. They sat down together, and for a while he simply watched her, memorizing the way she moved, the way she held her fork, the way she looked at him as if she were an actress wearing a costume called Faithful Wife. He asked her how her day had gone. She answered effortlessly, weaving stories about errands and traffic, never once stumbling. He smiled back, each grin a fracture widening in his chest. Inside his mind, he whispered to himself, I wasn't talking to her. I was talking to the mask she wore. Later that night, she disappeared into the shower, humming softly, steam curling beneath the bathroom door. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. He hesitated for a moment, his hand hovering over it, but then he picked it up. The message glowed on the screen. I can't stop thinking about you today. Lunch wasn't enough. His breath left him in a single violent exhale. Rage rose like fire, sorrow like ice, colliding inside his chest until he thought he might break apart. When she stepped back into the bedroom wrapped in a towel, he was sitting on the edge of the bed, her phone in his hand. He looked up at her calmly, though his voice carried the weight of everything he'd seen. So, he asked quietly, how's Jason? Did he enjoy lunch? Her body froze. The towel slipped slightly from her shoulder as she stared at him. Lips parted, but no words came out. That silence, raw, heavy, undeniable, was louder than any confession. He had his answer. When her voice finally returned, it was coated with denial. He's just a friend. You're blowing this out of proportion. She stepped closer, her eyes sharp, defensive. Why are you going through my phone? Don't you trust me? He held up the device, the glowing messages like fireflies in the dark. Trust you? His voice cracked, both furious and broken. Do you read these words the same way I do? Do friends say they can't get enough of each other after lunch? Her tone shifted, the denial twisting into anger. You're paranoid. You always have been. You imagine things that aren't there. But the mask was slipping. Her hands shook, her face flushed, and he pressed harder, laying out the evidence, every text, every lie, every trace of Jason that she had tried to bury under excuses. The argument exploded, their voices colliding like thunder in the small room. His words poured from heartbreak and betrayal. How he had trusted her blindly, how he had built their life on loyalty while she had chipped away at it in secret. Her replies veered between blame and guilt, accusing him of neglect, of not being enough, then softening into half apologies that only deepened the wound. The air between them burned with bitterness, every sentence a reminder that the ground they stood on was crumbling. Finally, he stood, his voice low but steady, carrying more weight than shouting ever could. You didn't know I came back early, and that's how I caught you. The silence that followed was unbearable. She stared at him, her face pale, her eyes wide, as if she had just been struck by lightning. No words could save her now. The truth was written everywhere. In that silence, the marriage collapsed. It wasn't just betrayal. It was the death of something sacred, the end of what once felt unbreakable. He lay awake long after the shouting had stopped, staring at the ceiling while she turned away from him, her breathing shallow, and restless. The silence in the room was thick, heavier than the storm of words they had thrown at each other. Forgiveness hovered in the air like a fragile possibility, but even as he considered it, he knew what it would mean: endless doubt, constant suspicion, a lifetime of looking over his shoulder. If he stayed, every laugh, every late text, every casual outing would reopen the wound. Trust, once shattered, could not be glued back together without leaving scars. Leaving would break him, but it would also save him. It would give him back his dignity, the one thing she hadn't been able to touch. And so, as dawn crept closer, he made his choice. He rose from the bed quietly, careful not to wake her. His suitcase was still in the car, untouched since his return, and now it would serve a different purpose. He gathered what little he needed: clothes, documents, the essentials of a man about to erase a chapter of his life. On the desk, he placed a piece of paper, written in a hand steadier than his heart felt. "You wanted freedom. Here it is. Don't call me again." Beside the note, he set down his wedding ring. It gleamed faintly in the dim light, a small circle of gold that had once symbolized eternity. Now it was only a reminder of promises betrayed. Leaving it behind was more than symbolism. It was release, a quiet declaration that he would no longer be bound by lies. As the first streaks of morning painted the horizon, he slipped out of the house. The air was cool, the street empty, the world still asleep. He drove slowly, each mile pulling him farther from the life he had built and the woman he had once trusted with everything. His chest ached with a hollow kind of pain, the ache of love lost not to death but to deceit. He thought of all the small moments they had shared, the laughter, the dreams, the comfort of a familiar touch, and each memory felt like a knife twisted by her betrayal. Yet beneath the grief, a strange clarity emerged. Trust was not a gift to be squandered, and respect was not something to be begged for. He had given both freely, and she had broken them. But in leaving, he reclaimed something more valuable than her apologies: his self-respect. The house shrank in the rearview mirror, fading into the pale morning light until it was only a shadow behind him. He didn't look back again. Some chapters aren't meant to be reread, and as the road stretched out before him, he spoke, not aloud but to himself, and perhaps to anyone who would one day hear his story. Betrayal is a wound, yes, but also a lesson. It teaches the cost of blind trust, the strength hidden in heartbreak, and the truth that sometimes walking away is the only way to survive. He asked himself one last question, a question that lingered even as the sun rose higher. Was she worth it? Or was this the lesson I was meant to learn? Thanks for watching. For more videos, please subscribe. Our channel, Awesome Visual Story,